This is Clayton Howe's Entertainment X. For part 2 with Bryce Pinkham, we continue the conversation on finding the balance between letting things happen and making things happen. We also talk about walking through open doors, show business, and laughing more and worrying less. So I hope you enjoy this part 2 with Bryce Pinkham. How do you find the balance between making things happen and letting things happen?
Yeah, great question. How do I find the balance between making things happen and letting things happen? I always say that I'm fond of walking through doors when they open. You know, a door opens for you. I think I like walking through them to see what's in there. And at the same time, like, I think the harder thing for me to do is not walking through an open door that I don't know what's on the other side. The harder thing for me to do is knock on a door and say, I want to come in. And so I have to work more on that I've always had to work more on that part. And it goes hand in hand with this feeling of, you know, oftentimes that involves self-promotion and self-aggrandizement. And, you know, there's a fine line between confidence and cockiness. And so anytime I start to feel like I'm boasting or, you know, for lack of a better word, cocky, I always feel like I'm on the wrong side of my own moral guidelines, compass, you know, what I like in people. So finding that line and still figuring out a way to knock on a door and saying, hey, I'd really like to work with you. Or like, I heard about that thing you're doing. Would you consider seeing me for it? I think the trick to it, not that I figured it out because I still struggle with it, but at least what I try and do is acknowledge that sometimes you're just not the person for the role that you think you're the person for. And being more in the director's chair has really shown me that in a way that I understand better now. It's like sometimes you don't fit the vision that some specific person or group of people have in their head. And that doesn't mean you're not good, you're not qualified, couldn't do it, any of those things. It's just like, no, I always imagined that he would be a redhead, and you don't have red hair, and we don't have money for a wig. So, you know, it can be really that simple. And so accepting that and asking confidently, but not, you know, not in a braggadocious way, is what I would call knocking on a door and seeing if somebody answers. And so it is a balance. And I think for some people, walking through an unknown door is a harder decision. You know, if a door opens for you and you have no idea what that show is going to be like or what those people are like, or, you know, I had a job come to me during the pandemic where somebody wrote to me on social media and said, hey, I've seen your work and I'd love for you to audition for this animated series that I'm making on my own and putting it on my YouTube channel. And at the time I was like, you know, there was no work going on. I just had my second child and was just sort of starved for anything creative. And so I was like, yeah, here's an open door. I will definitely walk through it. And it's turned into this incredible little job. It's not a little job. It turned into, you know, we're recording a second season, and it's all in this independent creator who's made her own studio and has employed a couple of Broadway people in this sort of animated cartoon for adults. And, you know, it's been one of the great surprises of my recent career. And had I not just sort of said, okay, yes, what are we doing? I think I would have missed it. I think if I had let my critic take that one, I think I would have missed the whole shebang. So, and at the same time, sometimes a door opens and you get a slight peek and you go, do you know what? I'm going to wait, or not for me. So it's all about balance. I mean, that was your question. How do you balance, how do you balance those things? And I think the answer is you got to keep tabs on balance. Am I saying yes to everything? And if so, why? Is it because I really want to do all that stuff, or is it because I just don't want to be left out? And am I saying no to everything? Why? Is it because I really don't want to do all those things, or am I a little scared because I haven't done anything in a while and I'm scared about failing again? So keeping track of yourself in a self-aware and yet kind to thyself way is at least what I try to do. And like I said, door opens 65% of the time I'm walking through it, maybe even 70.
Is there a common piece of incorrect advice that you hear in theater or in life?
Yeah, I'm fond of reminding people that our business is a business, and it's not called show fun or show fair or show everybody wins. It's called show business. And I think a lot of times I hear actors, young actors, I've heard the advice of, this has to be the only thing you've ever wanted to do. And you must be entirely devoted to this. And if you don't care that much about it, you'll never make it. And I just feel like it's a bit dramatic, unsurprisingly, and a bit extreme. And I've always felt like, ironically, the more things you are good at, the better chance you have at actually starting and sustaining a business. And actors younger than I am recognize this more and more, that, you see people who are multi-hyphenated. I'm an actor, director, writer, influencer. And that's because it's more and more being shown to be true that the more things you are good at, or rather I should say, the more things that you invest in, the better chance you have at starting a business. Now, I will say the counter advice is, maybe don't try to start all those things at once. A startup business usually starts with one product that identifies, that creates a brand that has a certain reliability to it. I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, the only one I can think of is Apple, and that's a little extreme for our metaphor here. But, you start with one product that everybody can get to know and rely on and come back to and say, yeah, I've had 3 of these Apple computers and boy, they're amazing. I won't ever buy anything other than an Apple. Wait, they make cell phones? Oh, they make cases for their cell phone? Oh, they make da-da-da-da-da-da. Suddenly, everything I owned is Apple. I'm an Apple person. But I think kids who start out saying, I'm an actor, I'm a director, I write, I'm a musician, I also love poetry, you should check out my YouTube channel. I also have this amazing influencer career. And I just think, from my perspective, I start to go, okay, but what can I rely on? What's the basis of this business you're trying to start right out of school? And I had to learn this lesson in terms of, I wanted to do everything as an actor, Oh, I can do Shakespeare, I can do Moliere, I can do musical theater, I can do straight plays, I can do TV and film, I can do. And ultimately, I had to choose one place and really through a series of open doors, realized that, okay, where I'm starting this business is in musical theater. And whether I like it or not, that is where my business is going to be founded. And I will build and expand on it from there. And as you pointed out at the top of our conversation, like I'm still doing that, I'm still sort of starting to say, hey, I'm delving into directing now. Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Knowing your work as an actor, I can imagine you might like to direct these sorts of things. So again, it's like referring back to the foundation of the business as a touch point for where the business could grow and what sort of things you could see that person doing. So I guess your question was about bad advice, and that was my attempt at giving the advice I like to give, which is like start specifically, but then be ready to do lots of things. And don't, if you're still in school, I always say, please, if you want to be an actor, please go take a business course. And if you want to be an actor, you don't have to only study acting. There are lots of ways to learn how to learn in many different subjects, because that's what we do as actors. We get a new story and we have to learn how to learn. And oftentimes that's research. Oftentimes that's interviewing people. A lot of times that's collaboration and learning how to manage being in a room with a bunch of collaborators you've never met before. These are all skill sets that don't just come from, memorizing the history of Western theater. So I encourage young students to make sure they're keeping their options open and learning from lots of different caches of knowledge.
Bryce, your career to date is quite extraordinary. I mean, it is what you've done in entertainment, and now, mentioning family and children and having all of this in your life. I am very, very curious how you've balanced or are balancing all the achievements versus fulfillment.
Wow, that's a great question. I think it changes over time. I think that an achievement is momentary and kind of gone after you get there. It's like you climb up a mountain and then you're like, okay, well, there's nowhere else to go. So I guess I'm going back down until I can find another mountain to climb. And fulfillment is like enjoying the hike up, enjoying the hike down, like enjoying the people you're hiking with. So I think fulfillment becomes more about relationships and more about purpose and more about why. And achievement is we premiered a new show that didn't exist before we worked on it. That's an achievement, and that's worthy of praise and worthy of acknowledgement and worthy of pride. But I think further than that, like I worked with new people that I want to keep working with. I have a new relationship with that director or those performers, and I have new friends in my life. I have forever friends from that project, and that took me a while to understand, that the balance that you mentioned between work and life is really crucial to both. We've had a lot of life with not a lot of work over the past few years, and it's been tough. Yeah. We've had to acknowledge that, my wife and I are both performers, and we've had to acknowledge that we don't feel entirely like ourselves when we're not doing something creative and when we're not performing in some way. Even directing is performing, because you're kind of like playing a role. At least I feel that way. And then, in my early career, I was so focused on work that I felt like I had no life. I had no fulfilling relationships. And I really had to find a way to step back from the work and build up the other side of life. And then my career started to take off, because anytime I had a rejection or, something high stakes would come up, it would be easy for me to leave those stakes and that rejection sort of at the office, as it were, and return to my beautiful life, which is fulfilling in and of itself. I'm very fulfilled as a dad, and as a husband, and most of the time as a homeowner. Like I go out and I trim the roses or whatever, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. I've been outside. I've helped this plant. This plant is going to grow now because I was here. And, sure enough, a few weeks later, I'm like, look, flowers. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't done that thing. I think fulfillment comes in lots of different ways. And as you progress in this career, you start to see that it's less and less about the achievement of awards and opening nights and credits and all that, and more about the people who you're on the ride with and the relationships you keep through all the ups and downs, and the beautiful life that you cultivate on the outside of all of that stuff. So, your word balance, I think, is really key. And it's really hard to understand that when you're just starting out.
Metaphorically speaking, if you could put a word or a phrase on a billboard for millions of people to see, does anything come to mind?
Laugh, you idiots. No.
Perfect.
Anything come to mind on a billboard? Yeah, laugh more, worry less. That's what I'd like to. I'd like to see that on a billboard. I could use that reminder. I love the other prompt that I give myself and students and anyone else who will listen a lot of the time is, with great privilege comes great responsibility. I think that's a version of something President Kennedy said at some point, but I've loved that. Talk about balance. It's a privilege to perform on Broadway and to get to be chosen to do roles and premiere shows and perform in New York. How many people are dying to perform in our city? And so anytime I'm lucky enough to get to be, standing backstage waiting to go out and perform for an audience of New Yorkers and tourists and anyone else, I have to remind myself what a great privilege that is, and the responsibility that comes with that, responsibility to the show and to the audience, but also to anyone less fortunate than I in that given situation. And that means lots of things, but it means that I try to balance the privilege of what I get to do with the responsibility of doing good for others whenever that opportunity presents itself. And sometimes I create that opportunity myself. I knock on a door and say, hey, I think I could help. And sometimes an opportunity will present itself to me, and I try and walk through that door and say, yeah, this is a chance for me to make good on the responsibility part of that setup. With great privilege comes great responsibility. And I think as a straight white man, that also, for me, includes the continuing practice of becoming a better ally and, putting those choices into practice as much as I can, and learning better ways to do it, and seeking more knowledge about what I can do.
Mm.
So with great privilege comes great responsibility. We could put that on a billboard.
I love that. I love this conversation. Bryce, thank you for taking the time today. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap on up?
Gosh, so much. I'm fond of talking to students about something that one of my teachers, a mentor who I should mention, his name is Christopher Bays, and he's the head of physical movement and clown at the Yale School of Drama, where I went to school. And he has a way of naming a sort of part of ourselves, maybe the version of me, for example, that first grade teacher was responding to. And he calls it the little one. We each have a little one inside of us, who was the one who was told that they were too loud and too messy and too big. And that somewhere along the line, like, we were all diminished. We've all been diminished in some way. And even those around us with good intentions, our parents, our family, our friends, whoever, can have in some way have diminished us. And, I think one of the things that I continually try to give myself is permission to take care of that little one, tell him that he's going to be okay. And then also, like, let him drive and let him take the wheel, and let him lead. And, I think about that in various different areas of my life. I was thinking about it this morning as I was trying to get my kids ready for school. And my son had this balloon from a leftover birthday party, and he was trying to show it to me, and he was trying to, like, throw it at me. And I was on my phone, like, worried about time and and I had to be like, no, man, stop this. Put the little one in the car, in the driver's seat for a second, and look at this balloon, the way that your son, who's living the little one experience right now, is looking at it. And man, we had the greatest 5 minutes that I just feel like I would have missed. And of course we were early for school. Like, we were going to be fine. Adult Bryce has got that handled. And if he doesn't, who cares? It's just preschool. But little one, the little one in me was desperate to play with that balloon. And we had the best time, and we laughed, and my day took flight in that moment. And I thank my mentor, Chris Bays, for that sort of philosophy and that framing device that allows me to remind myself from time to time that we're all just little kids who grew up, but that we're still those little kids. And especially for those of us in creative fields, letting that what I call reckless creativity, because that's the name my first grade teacher gave to it. Letting that creativity take the wheel from time to time, and allowing the joy and abandon and wonder and curiosity, and impulsiveness that comes along with that little one, to have a little more space in our creative lives, but also just in our lives in general. I think that it can crack the shell that we all have to form in order to survive this world a little bit. Can crack us open in a way that allows us to connect to people sooner, allows us to reach out and help someone a little easier. My kids see somebody who needs help, and they're like, we should help that person. They don't know all the reasons that maybe you shouldn't help that person. That adult Bryce is like, no, we can't do that. That's dangerous. Whereas the little one, is just a little more generous of spirit. And so that's why I like to give the mention to that idea. And again, it's not mine. It's Chris Bays's. Chris Bays taught me that in his class, but I use it and I teach it as best I can to other students. And I think about it on stage too. That's the last thing I'll say is, sometimes I'll let the little one take the wheel right before I go on stage. And I have a fantastic time. I used to do that all the time in Gentleman's Guide. I would just say, hey man, remember when you were in the backyard learning the lyrics to Trouble? Like, you're here now. And that's an audience. That's a paying audience out there who are here to see you and your friends put on a show. How cool is that? And anytime I found myself like, I don't want to do, adult Bryce being like, oh God, this is hard. I don't want to do this today. I got so many things to do and I got to be here. I would just hand that driving wheel, hand that wheel over to the little one and let him steer the show. And inevitably I would just have a fantastic time. So that's my challenge to your listeners, is to nurture, take care of that little one and let them take the wheel from time to time and see what happens, and walk through an open door when you can. If you see one that's closed that you want to get into, give a confident but not cocky knock on that door and ask nicely, and who knows, maybe that door will open for you.
People of the world, Bryce Pinkham.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.